Hi, I'm Peter Nixon at the PDI studio in Discovery Bay in Hong Kong, a city that's been gripped with conflict now for a couple of years, not just pandemic, but political as well as economic. And so having tactics that help you manage stress and manage conflict, not only in yourself, but also in others, is very important. Today, we're looking at tactic number 17. And tactic number 17 suggests that you need to ask people what you don't know. And this prompted me to think about a client I worked with in Singapore that was searching for ways to figure out how to avert the conflict that they had just lived through. So what was the conflict? The conflict, my client was head of the news team that was flown into a crisis zone in order to cover the crisis. The crisis was a major earthquake, lots of death and destruction. And as you can imagine, when you're flown into a natural disaster, you need to stay there for a while because the air assets, the helicopters and the airplanes, are being used for search and rescue, and they're not being used to ferry camera crews around to take pictures. But getting the world's attention of these natural disasters is also very important in order to attract money to help with the rescue. And so what was the conflict? Well, what happened was the team leader assembled her crew, organized the air assets, got flown into the natural disaster, and within a few hours of arriving, one of her teammates broke down, just couldn't deal with the stress, couldn't deal with the death and destruction that they were witnessing firsthand all around them. Now, this is not easy for anyone to see. I've seen situations like this. If you've seen situations like this, you know it's very unsettling. But you need to carry on your work. And in this case, they needed to carry on their work. There was no alternative. You can't say, I don't like it, get me a helicopter and fly me out of here and fly in a replacement. You've got to work. So her request to me was, what can I do to make sure this never happens again? And my answer back was this tactic number 17, ask questions to find out what you don't know. And so in her interviews of her team, she could have asked in advance, have any of you been firsthand witnesses to death and destruction before? And if you haven't, there's a much higher risk that they're going to have a meltdown when they land in these dreadful situations. It doesn't guarantee that even if they've had experience that they won't have a meltdown, because it's something that we all learn about ourselves and we learn about others, how people react in major crises. But it's a useful tactic. So if you find yourself in crisis or in stress, yourself or others around you, ask questions. And if you can, ask questions of them now before you fall into crisis. Ask them if they've experienced it before. Ask them if they've experienced it before, how did they handle it? If they experience it again, how would they handle it differently? And if you can, have these dialogues in groups so that you can learn from each other, because that's very helpful, right? Because once she found herself with her team in that dreadful situation, I think it was the Sichuan earthquake, the teammates became a very important resource for her to resolve that situation. Anyway, we're not wishing this on any of you, but we're in the midst of World War C, climate crisis, COVID crisis, conflict crisis, World War C. So be prepared, ask questions, learn to manage stress and conflict, and you'll be much better off. I'm Peter Nixon. Stay tuned for the next tactic where we're talking about a music teacher.